each frame needs to continue the story. So you try in the script, if the director doesn't articulate that to you, you have to derive it from what's in the script. Like, what is the point of this scene? What is it that needs to be communicated to the audience? And what is the main character? In many ways, you're responding to it as a director would. You're just a director who has the ability to draw. So you're trying to analyze, what is this scene about? What is the character after? And then how do you then visualize that story? So every shot is a choice. Nothing can be there just because it's cool. A failure of storytelling.
Okay, today we're talking about storyboards. You know, those sketches that map out how a film will look before a single frame is shot. Now, you might be wondering, why is a design history channel talking about storyboarding? Well, think about it. Before a film becomes an icon of lighting, costume, set, or sound design, it's first a drawing, a sketch of how all those disciplines will collide. Storyboards are the bridge between imagination and execution, the place where design thinking meets cinematic storytelling. So, when we talk about how the design process shapes emotion, how form tells story, or how visual language becomes culture, it all begins here with storyboards. And this episode marks something new for the channel, a series where we go straight to the source. We're calling it The Process. In each installment, we'll sit down with the masters of the craft, the artists, designers, and storytellers who pull ideas from the abstract and turn them into something real. And today, we're kicking it off with one of the best in the business, storyboard artist and director Mark Bristol. Mark has spent decades visualizing some of the most recognizable films of our time. Mission Impossible, The Thin Red Line, translating scripts into moving pictures long before cameras roll. He's also a director himself, most recently of The Accidental Texan, which you can catch on Hulu. We're talking about the art of thinking in pictures, the design of movement, emotion, and story, with one of the artists who literally draws the movie before anybody shoots it. Mark Bristol, welcome to Creative Briefs.
Thank you so much for having me. Thrilled to talk about this.
I'm super excited, so I'm going to try to not fanboy too much.
It's easy to do. These are such cool things to talk about.
Yeah. So you worked on... I'm sorry?
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was thinking, you know, you've worked on some of the most visually iconic films of the last 3 decades. I mean, we're talking from action to period dramas. Your storyboards are often the first glimpse we get of what a movie's going to feel like. Before we talk about that, let's define what a storyboard artist is. Why are they important to a production? And when does that production usually bring you in to the filmmaking process?
Sure. Well, the history goes back primarily to Disney in the 1930s, and that's where the word storyboard comes from. So, you know, animated films, of course, storyboard every single shot. And they put all the drawings up on a board, a storyboard, where they can see the movie in its entirety. And they still do this today. And so it's a way for the writers and the director and Mr. Disney himself and the artist to get a sense of the flow and of the timing and the visuals that are involved and make those finite adjustments in a drawing and a sketch before they put all of their resources into actually animating the film or in live action before the cameras. And so it's a fantastic way for a director to visualize their movie and then to articulate that to the rest of the crew. It's beneficial on a small independent film like mine with Accidental Texan. I storyboarded most of the movie. It adds to efficiency. You're able to clarify your vision. You can make decisions very quickly. You can always go over to your storyboard, which you'll have printed up on set. And so it's a quick way to, you know, like for instance, if we're losing the light and we've got maybe an hour left of shooting, and I've still got 6 setups, I can go over to the storyboard with my first AD and my director of photography and go, okay, we only got time for 2 more setups. So let's cut this dolly. Let's consolidate these 2. And then we'll go in for these 2 shots. So it's a quick way to very quickly make your decisions and then get back to business. So it has multiple purposes. It's great in pre-production, which is where you're creating the storyboard. It's great during production. And then on Mission Impossible, I'm still storyboarding visual effects shots, computer graphics shots. So on the last mission, I think I wrapped a month before the movie came out. So it's also utilized in post production as well. So it's just a, you know, and it really comes down to, you know, you're literally drawing. These are just my thumbnail sketches. You're literally drawing every shot in a sequence, and it's a way for a director to plan their film and to help budget it. And, you know, again, if you've got visual effects, you can showcase the vision, and it gives a great opportunity for the producers then to take a look at the vision and say what we can afford and what we can't. Or if you've storyboarded 60 setups and on your first 2-3 days, you're averaging 30 setups, well, you know, you're going to have to start really consolidating that vision. So it's such a great tool to allow for efficiency, which is its primary goal.
So I'm very curious about your process here. They hand you a script. What's the first thing you do? What's your process for turning those words into a visual sequence? Like, where does your mind go first? Mood, composition, rhythm? Like, what are you looking for?
Well, every project is different. On Mission Impossible, there's rarely, if ever, a script. I get everything verbally told to me by Christopher McQuarrie. But on most films, yeah, you have a script, and the producers will sort of outline, you know, these are the scenes we'd like you to work on, or they'll give you your first assignment, like on Tron Ares. You know, we need you to work on this sequence. And so my first step is I have to build the world in my head first. I have to see it. So I'll reach out to locations. I'll reach out to costumes. I'll reach out to concept. I'll reach out to whomever I need to reach out to understand what is the visual landscape as we know it. Now, on some films, we could be in such early pre-production, I may have to do a lot of that research myself. But the films that are further along, so I build a resource of images and, you know, set up a file folder on my computer. And so therefore, I'm starting to see the work that the director has already done to visualize their movie. You know, sets, locations, you know, especially, you know, if it's a set, I need to know the geography so that I can then start building the shots in my head. Now, most movies, you know, you have some directors like John Lee Hancock, who I've worked with many times, and he knows exactly what he wants. He can't draw, but he knows every shot. And so he'll do these overhead plans of the set and all the actors and their movement, and he places all the cameras. And then he and I will go over that, you know, the script. I'll have my photographs of the set, the location, and then I've got his diagram. And so he just articulates, you know, what he sees and how he sees the camera movement. And I, you know, like I showed before, I'll take all my little notes in these really quick thumbnails. So you have those types of directors that you're there to bring to life their vision, and they've already got it mapped out. Then you have other directors, you know, that it's kind of a middle ground, like Noah Hawley is also another director who knows exactly what he wants, but he's also very open to, well, hey, what about this? That's a great idea. Let's do that, right? So usually there's a dialogue. A lot of times they're hiring a storyboard artist, not just to render their vision, but to participate in their visual creation of their film or television show. And then there's the third, like Christopher McQuarrie, who I've been dear friends with for 30 years. We met at the Austin Film Festival. And in many ways, I'm almost a writer on the film with him, because like I said, he'll verbally tell me the story. And there's no greater storyteller in Hollywood. And then I'll go off and do all the research, and, you know, certainly in the early pre-production. And then I'll deliver a draft of the storyboards. And then from that, we'll iterate, right? And he'll make his changes and we build the scene, you know, or maybe we take it in a different direction. So we build upon that. And then once those storyboards are locked, you know, then off to production it goes. Now that process may take 3 or 4 months. Like the helicopter sequence in Fallout took, I think I worked on that for 6 months. And so that's a very different story. Like nobody storyboards the way Chris McQuarrie and I do. I'm usually one of the first people he hires and one of the last people he has let go, because he's always, you know, he's so focused on story and character and you know, that it's a great way to sort of hand off some of the visual design for these action sequences, and then he comes in and makes it his own so that the final set of storyboards represent, what he has in mind. But I know him so well, and I know what he likes, and I know how he likes to shoot, that I can take that off of his shoulders and allow him to go and focus on other things. So, so that's kind of the gamut of, and you never know who you're going to get, right? Like on television, you're every week you're working with a new director, like on Fear the Walking Dead every 2 weeks. And so you never know who you're going to get, somebody who's really clear or somebody that needs some help, or they hand it to you to figure out. And so that's kind of the excitement of each project, never quite knowing what the director is unless you've worked with them before, but you have to just be prepared for, whatever they hand you.
When you're working on mission, of course, those are amazing over the top stories, but they are somewhat tethered to reality, right? And so you can envision a real world in which these stories play out. But last night, I had the chance to see Tron Ares in 3D. And I was remembering how you were one of the storyboard artists on that one. That movie is completely untethered from reality. So
Right.
when you are storyboarding something like that, where do you start? Do you have like reference art? Do you go back and watch the original film? Like, where do you begin to envision this digital world?
Well, one of the greatest things I've learned so much from Christopher McQuarrie, but of course, everything comes down to story and emotion.
Mm,
And so, the each frame needs to continue the story. So you try in the script, if the director doesn't articulate that to you, you have to derive it from what's in the script. Like, what is the point of this scene? What is it that needs to be communicated to the audience? And
mhm,
what is the main character? In many ways, you're responding to it as a director would. You're just a director who has the ability to draw. So you're trying to analyze, what is this scene about? What is the character after? And then how do you then visualize that story? So every shot is a choice. Nothing can be there just because it's cool. A failure of storytelling. So you first have to do your best to analyze the story, analyze the script, or analyze what it is you've been told by a director. And then, yeah, and like I said before, I have to then paint the world. So go get all the concept art, go whatever it is that I'm having to work within. And movies that are more, sci-fi like Tron, obviously, you've got to go get the costumes, and they were work in progress, but you could get an assimilation of it. The light cycles were work in progress. All of the elements were work in progress, but they're close enough to get you where you need to go. And for me, once I kind of have all that built in my head, it's this really exciting time where I put music on. I build a soundtrack for every show I'm working on. With Tron, it was easy. I just put Daft Punk on. And so I'll take the scene, and I take my blank sheet of paper with my trusty pen, and I just sit down with the music and I let the scene start. And it's
mm,
it's the most amazing process where the movie starts playing in my head, and I'm literally taking dictation. So these thumbnail sketches are just me taking notes as I'm seeing it in my head. I'm taking these notes as quickly as I can, as quickly as the pacing in the film that's playing in my head is going. I'll do my thumbnail sketches, and that's where it's coming out of my imagination onto the page, and that's where I design the sequence.
mhm,
Amazingly enough, that first pass with that thumbnail sketch is what I adhere to. Now, of course, then you render it. Then I do everything by hand with regard to my sketches, but now I do everything digitally. So then once I've designed the sequence, then I'll go digitally. And on Tron Ares, everything had to be turned into an animatic. And an animatic is a rough animated storyboard. So that way you can show movement, you can show character blocking in tandem with movement. On Mission, we don't do that. We turn everything into previs. So the storyboards are still a 2D storyboard that then gets translated into previs, which is like a rough 3D animation. Same thing. You're seeing all of the movement, right? So on
mhm.
Ares, it was designing the shots and then turning them into animatics, and adding music and sound effects, and it's a really cool, amazing process. And then you deliver the animatic to the director, and then they give their feedback, and you'll make your changes. He'll say what he likes or doesn't like, or and on Aries, it was he gave kind of a high level. This is what I'm after. But as with most animated films, and in many ways, that was kind of an animated movie with regard to all the stuff we were working on, they leave it in many ways to the storyboard artist to come up with a sequence. And so I'll be real curious. I've seen some of my shots in the trailer, but I'm really curious how closely he adhered to the storyboards, the animatic. I imagine he went off and did his own thing, but they're a good baseline, a good foundation to start with. So that's going to be one of the things of the sequences that I worked on. I can't wait to see how close it is, or what kind of departures he made from what we worked on together. So that'll be exciting to see.
Oh, very cool.
And it's always fascinating as a filmmaker, like like on Mission again, because we work so hard on those storyboards, and Chris follows the storyboards nearly exactly, which is just a thrill. But when he deviates, I'm always like, why didn't I think of that? Oh, that's such a better choice. Why didn't we come up with that? So it's always a great education, to go. I mean, to watch his movies, McQuarrie's movies, is always a great education, but particularly
Yeah.
on the things that we worked on together. Or I also see, what Eddie Hamilton, the editor, because me and Chris and Eddie work really closely together. We're always on the same Zoom calls together. And so it also is fascinating to see what editorial choices they've made to trim a sequence, or to cut a sequence out completely. And to have a window into that. So, it's always fascinating to watch how the boards then become, the final film.
I wonder, with movies like Mission and Thin Red Line, there's
Mm.
a sense of rhythm and emotional tension in the story, right? How do you go about trying to capture suspense or tension
Mm.
when you're storyboarding a sequence?
Well, I've said this before, that to me, I feel the best storyboard artists have to be, a director, an editor, a cinematographer, a writer. They have to know all of the disciplines, because you're thinking about all of that as you're designing the scene. And so if the scene requires suspense, then you're also delving into your lifelong obsession with movies. And
Mm.
you've seen them all, not them all, but you've seen so many of them that they're all swimming around inside your imagination. You can draw upon Hitchcock, you can, De Palma, you can draw upon all these great filmmakers of suspense, right?
Hmm.
And what tools they've utilized. And, you're standing always on the shoulders of giants. And so, like, what is going to be thrilling for the audience? What is going to be exciting for them? How do you hold back information so that that suspenseful element can then be effective? Um, and so, yeah, you're always, filmmaking so intrinsically, and the language of it, so that you can then implement that into your design. But you're also doing it, you can't do it through it can't be you. I mean, it's you to an extent, but you have to try to get into the head of the director you're working with. And
Hmm.
sometimes you have that opportunity, and other times you don't. Again, things can be moving so quickly, like in television, but you're there to help them. You're there to facilitate their vision. You're not there to try to, broadcast your own filmmaking interest. You're only there as a tool to help them achieve their goals. And so, yeah, you're drawing upon the history of whatever. I try to go see the work of whatever director it is that I'm working with, if I haven't worked with them before, to try to see how they like to lens things, how they like to operate. But so I do all my homework to try to get into their headspace, so that my storyboards can be as accurate to their vision as possible. And that's why McQuarrie, he and I have such a great relationship, because I know him so well, and I know exactly how he likes to frame things. And he has switched things up by doing more Dutch angles, which is interesting. But so it's that, it's just that you're there to support their vision. And so back to suspense, or whatever the scene has, like I said before, you're trying to delve into, what is this scene about? What is
Mm.
what is it conveying to the audience, and how can I help convey that through shot design, whether it's a comedy or action or sci-fi or combat sequence. It just all depends on the subject matter and the pacing of the film. And again, you're kind of myopic. A lot of times you're just working on this scene and you don't have vision on what comes before it or what comes after it. So you may not always be right in the pacing, but again, you get the bulk of it design, and then the editor, once they shoot it, the art of editing comes into play.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about being both creator and storyboard artist, right? I storyboard almost everything I direct, sometimes even
Good.
for YouTube videos. I like to think of it as like a clarity check. Do I really know how to say what I want to say?
Right.
I'm wondering, what advice would you give creators who are just starting to sketch out their ideas? How do you bring life to your boards? And are there any mistakes they should avoid?
Great question. You look at Martin Scorsese's storyboards that he does, and there's stick figures,
Mm,
and that's all that it needs. Because but because he clearly sees it in his head, he just doesn't quite have the ability to draw, and that's okay. So even if you're just using stick figures, or if you're using applications now that will allow you to storyboard with rudimentary 3D, don't use AI for fucking storyboards. I'll tell you that right
yes.
now, because that's stealing from all of
100%
us.
agree.
So don't do that. But I mean,
Also, they look like shit.
it's terrible, and so don't do that. But there are apps you can buy that can help you storyboard. But yeah, I mean, again, if you're designing a scene, if it's a fairly simple dialogue scene, this is all you need, right? So you got a single, you got an over the shoulder, a reverse over the shoulder, and a closer single, right?
Mm,
That's there's no artistic skill needed in that. And
no.
oftentimes that I'm directing, you'll be on set and that's all you need. It's when
Yeah.
you have to articulate it to a larger crew that you have to take the storyboards and, into a much more refined, detail so that other people can understand it. So yeah, I would say no matter what your skills are, sit down with a piece of paper and your pen and work through it, because it's not just about the scene itself. What I have found, it's also, what are your transitions? David Lean, Lawrence of Arabia, and Dr. Zhivago was an editor,
Hmm.
one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. But he was often interested in what was the last shot of the previous scene and the first shot of the next scene. So how do they relate, and how can
Hmm.
they, how can they bring the audience along into the next scene? So again, the beautiful thing about storyboards is, you know, you're not just thinking about one scene. You need to be thinking about holistically. How is it moving from one scene into the next and creating that flow? Or like in Lawrence of Arabia, I must find something honorable, and it cuts the train screeching, and here comes that beautiful horse. And I think Spielberg took that to truck. What truck? And then it cuts to, the truck pulling in with the ark and that amazing music from John Williams. It's that kind of thing. You're thinking already editorially through your storyboard process, right?
Yeah.
So now, you know, you're not just designing in stick figures this one scene, but what is the scene before it? And how does it blend into this one? Because again, like, you don't want to, I mean, maybe you do, but a lot, you're maybe not going to want to go unless it's your intent. But like, let's say this is where we're cutting, and we're cutting from a close up to another close up, but we're in a completely different location. That
Hmm.
may not jive, right? Like and if you're, even on a low budget project where you don't have time, again, like, maybe you need, if you're coming into your next location, we go from a close up, to a wide shot. So we understand the geography of the room and we don't
Hmm.
feel we're jump cutting. And so that's what this type of design work with storyboards helps you understand. And it allows you to design these things cheaply. And you'll find it's one of the most enjoyable processes, because there's nobody telling you you're out of time, or there's no producer, breathing over your shoulder. It's just you and your imagination. And that is like that's why Hitchcock loved storyboarding so much, because he was just free to express exactly what he wanted.
Yeah.
And then of course, all of the when you're filming, as you know, I mean, you're just battling one, possible calamity after another with regard to time and light, and you're always compromising, which is part of it. That's part of the fun. That's part of the challenge. But with
Yeah.
storyboarding, it's just you and your imagination, which is
Yeah.
a great process to be involved in. So again, go for it. If you're a young filmmaker, no matter what stage you're at, I have found that storyboards on no budget projects all the way up to $200 million, Mission Impossibles, it still serves the exact same process,
Yeah.
efficient.
Let me know if you agree with this statement. The best directors are often really good storyboard artists. Thinking specifically about Ridley Scott. I know we're
The
both
best.
Alien fanboys. How do you think his experience and his skill as a storyboard artist served him, especially in kind of an early film like 1979's Alien? Um, how did being a storyboard artist give him an advantage there?
100%. I'm sure you know this story, but so when he was given the film, I think it was budgeted $3.5 million, $1978. And he went off, and he already had some concept art from Giger and some of the other amazing Mobius, and he went off and he storyboarded the entire movie. And he came back to Fox with his vision, presented it to him. They were so impressed, they doubled the budget to like 7.8. So right there, the storyboards gave him, the opportunity to impress the bean counters, the studio bosses, and he got a much more substantial budget. So, which of course allowed him to bring that masterpiece to cinema. So, not only did it serve him in that purpose, but again, I love seeing images of Ridley, and those of us that can, storyboard. It's a great thing when again, you're trying to articulate something to your cinematographer, and with a quick sketch, right? You can show, that I want the crane. This is from Alien. What's that creature in the seat called? Oh,
Space
okay. So
Jockey.
remember when, these are actually Ridley Scott's children, but when the astronauts come up over the edge and the camera cranes back to
Yeah.
reveal the navigator or whatever he's called. Right. So
Yeah.
here, it took me seconds to draw this, but now my cameraman knows exactly how to frame it. Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what a storyboard artist can do is tell your team within seconds, what you want. And so, that's a great thing. So now it's an over the shoulder to the creature, and that's all the information you need, right?
Yeah.
So not only can you spend the time in pre-production drawing, Ridley, from what I hear, often draws on his way to set. And he's one of the best storyboarders. Not only is he one of the greatest directors of all time, but he's also just a remarkable storyboard artist. But it also gives you that ability on set to again quickly draw and articulate what it is. And I think also having an artist's eye. You've been drawing all your life, immersed in cinema, and so it also gives you, I think, a different perspective maybe on how to frame things and design things. It served him well. I think he only storyboards his own movie. I'll tell you this real quickly. So, but back in the day, he used to hire storyboard artists. And when I was a eager young college student back in Austin at the University of Texas, I had a very early nascent, storyboard portfolio. I'd only worked on a couple TV shows, but I was obsessed with Ridley Scott,
Mm.
and being his storyboard artist was like my college goal. And so every year I would send him my portfolio and my tiny little resume, but it would grow, right, while I was at UT doing various projects. And unbelievably, I got a call from RSA, from Ridley Scott's office, that he had seen my work and wanted to hire me for G.I. Jane.
Whoa.
And so it's a lifelong dream. And they were like, can you be out in Los Angeles on Thursday? I'm like, absolutely. Click, packing, getting everything ready to go. Holy shit. And then they called like on a Tuesday, oh, we're gonna have to push it to the following week. Anyhow, this pushing kept going. Then it got harder to get a hold of them. And finally it was, oh, I'm sorry, he's already headed off to Morocco. He's not gonna be able to storyboard on this
Mm.
project. Heartbreak. But still, at least I knew my hero chose me at a very young age to
Yeah,
work alongside him, which would have just been, of course, remarkable. But that's one of my few regrets in the film industry, but a pretty cool story nonetheless.
that is super cool.
I know, I know. I just, I can't believe it. So hopefully I'll get to meet him one day and relay that back to him.
Yeah. It's funny. You and I were chatting about gigs we missed out on. And for me, I was a prop builder on Sam Esmail's feature right before Mr. Robot and had the opportunity to come back to build props for Mr. Robot. And I couldn't because I was based in Cape Town at the time.
Okay.
We were talking about with you though, that was Alien Earth. We're
Yes.
both major Alien fans. And I think we kind of bonded over that. Well, okay. Tell me about the potential Alien Earth gig, why that was important, and then let's jump to the fun challenge that kind of stemmed from that.
Sure. Noah
Yeah,
Hawley lives in Austin, Texas, and the Alamo Draft House back during Rogue Nation had a short little interview with me talking about storyboards before the film. And so he was just starting to work on, I think, Legion. Was that the first thing we worked on? I think it was. And he was sitting there in the audience at Rogue Nation and saw this interview with me and said, "Oh, I need a storyboarder. I guess I'll hire that guy." Right. So we started working together, and we've worked together for about 10 years on everything he's done, his feature film to a Fargo. Just again, he's somebody who knows exactly what he wants, which is it's a great thrill to storyboard for him. But I was on the Mission Impossible films and couldn't do Alien Earth, which was a huge disappointment because like we've talked about, it's, top 5 favorite films and it's just a remarkable show. I mean, he knocked it out of the park. It's so good.
mm,
And so anyway, that was a bit of a disappointment. I'm so thrilled for him. And I'm hoping that there'll be a season 2. And I just, bravo, brilliant, brilliant show. So yeah, so our challenge together, which was a lot of fun, you asked me to draw a storyboard, more of a concept drawing than a storyboard, from your favorite episode, which was episode 2, kind of blending into episode 3, which was Wendy, with the sword, the paper cutter that she turned into
mm,
a sword. So when you told me that, and this goes straight back to kind of what we've been talking about, as soon as you told me what your favorite scene was, the image hit me immediately. I knew exactly what I wanted to draw. So, like I said before, I started sketching, right? Compositions, trying to figure out, how is the alien, originally I had seen him kind of up on some crates, or was he kind of in a little bit more, what's the alien's pose? I already knew I kind of wanted this, which was a bit of an echo from Ralph McQuarrie's early, Vader lightsaber duel, one of my favorite poses of all time. So I thought I might echo that just for fun. And then I tried, just different compositions, different sketches, right? Finally kind of started to land on it. I did another one, starting to get a little close, but they felt a little small in frame. I wanted Wendy to be a little larger, a little more dominant. So then I finally arrived at this composition and I felt really good about it. So once I did this, like I said before, I went off, researched what does her costume look like? What does the sword look like? Looked at all the different designs for Noah's version of the xenomorph. And so I had all those, up on my computer screen, and then I did the final drawing. So I pencil it all in, so I can get my composition, right? And then I start, and then you just start doing the line work, the inking on it. And this is more like I'll do this on Mission or other films. I consider this more key art. Like I
mm,
would rarely ever take this much time to do a storyboard. You usually don't have the time. When
mm,
you're doing visual effects shots, you'll take the time maybe to do something. And of course, usually now I would do this all digitally, but because this is your gift, I wanted to have something you could actually hang. So yeah, so then, you render the final drawing. And it's always, I find that, the final sketch to the final drawing are
yeah,
close, but it's frustrating. This is one of the few things I have as a frustration. I always find the dynamic of the poses are always just a little bit better in my sketch than in the
yeah,
final draw. And I made some changes. Obviously, you can see the pose of the alien, is a little different. So that's always kind of just a. So I'll send you all of these variations on that, but it gives your listeners a, kind of a window again into the process of how you arrive at the final, and in many ways, again, back to story. It can't just be a cool drawing. It's the showdown, and we didn't see this showdown on screen, right? She got pulled through that doorway, and then we come in the aftermath, which is the xenomorph has been killed by her. So this is kind of an off-screen moment of what happened in that room just before the attack. So again, it felt like kind of a mano a mano moment here where they're both, ready for combat, and we don't quite know what the outcome will be just yet.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh my God, that's so cool.
Oh, it was so much fun to draw. So much fun to draw, as always, And it was cool to
Yeah.
really look into the xenomorph design on Noah's alien, just the differences, the subtle differences that are in that creature, which is super cool.
Yeah. One of the other things I loved about this challenge was it was almost like a second chance at getting the dream gig, you know.
Yeah. No, exactly. It felt good. It felt good, definitely. It felt good.
Be sure to show that to Noah going for season 2.
Hey,
Uh, so sticking on Alien for just a sec, I heard you have a Ron Cobb story. And as we've learned from the comments in the semiotics episode, we've got a lot of big Ron Cobb fans. And I wondered if you wouldn't mind sharing that.
well, that was a great episode, by the way. I absolutely love that. And
Thank
yeah,
you.
I've been a fan of Ron Cobb since, I got my first Art of Alien book back in the early 80s. And I used to copy his designs, as I'm learning how to draw, and, his designs for the Nostromo. I must have redrawn that countless times. And so always a huge, admirer of his. So when Alien Isolation came out about 11 years ago, I hosted a talk at South by Southwest, and I invited Al, the creative director of Alien Isolation, which I just thought was is best video game I've ever played.
Mm.
Screaming. I've screamed more during that game than in any of the films. But anyhow, I invited Al to come over, and we had a conversation about the design, the aesthetic design of Alien, and then how it translated into his brilliant game. And as a part of that, I think he introduced me to Ron Cobb via email. He was living in Australia at the time, I believe. So, he was very kind to answer some questions. And one of the coolest things that he answered was he gave me, it was one of his, what are they called again? His designs of all the different, around the Nostromo, all the different
Oh, the
icons.
semiotic standard is
Right.
that
So
system.
he told me this was his little inside joke, and I'll sketch it out for you here real quick. That I've never seen talked about before, and I've shared this with some of the other concept artists from Romulus, and they always get a big laugh out of it. But I'm not going to draw it correctly. Well, anyway, that's not correct. Well, the icon that is on every doorway in Alien is the Purina dog chow
Is it?
logo.
Because there's been a
Yes.
lot of chatter in the comments about whether or not that's the Purina Dog Chow logo.
Well, it's from Ron Cobb's, mouth
Holy
to your
shit.
ears. He said that was his inside joke, that everybody on board was dead meat.
Yeah.
Isn't that awesome?
Oh my God. That is an amazing story.
Yeah, I love that.
I tried to shrug off the similarities, going, no, there is no way that is based on the Purina logo.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
it. That's a little, and it's so great because it's in Alien Earth as well.
Yeah.
That visual is that inside joke has continued through many films, and it was in Romulus. So I thought that was pretty brilliant, pretty sharp.
That is so cool. Wow. Okay. All right. People in the comments, I was wrong. It is the Purina logo. Oh, very cool. Well, hey, I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing these awesome stories and insight with us. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's my great pleasure. I mean, most storyboard artists, rightfully and understandably, humbly live, behind the scenes. So it's always a pleasure to be able to, have a little bit of a light shown on us and to, talk about our craft and what we do. So I deeply appreciate the opportunity, and it was wonderful to chat with you.